The views and opinions expressed in the following podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the producers, the affiliates, or digital platforms hosting this podcast. All content is for the purposes of education, conjecture, and at times entertainment. We promote inclusiveness and diversity. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Into the Deep with Jay Costa.
Welcome to Into the Deep. I'm Jay Costa. Imagine you're a teenager in your bedroom listening to music on the radio. You're listening to some of your favorite songs and favorite artists coming through the speakers. And a band comes on next with a brand new hit single. Just happens to be a band that you spent some time with. The music's playing and the vocals start. And there's something oddly familiar about the words that are being sung. In fact, those words are your words, verbatim. Well, that's the experience that today's guest had and talks about in her book entitled, Oh, Cheri, Dancing with My Soul, The Journey of the Yellow Notebook. Today's guest is Cheri DeLavie. Cheri's the author of the book, which is based on a true story. And Cheri talks about being an American dependent who moved from New Orleans to Frankfurt, West Germany during the Cold War in 1978. She found herself immersed in a whole new world during a pivotal time in history. The book is a spirited, authentic retelling of her experiences and how she perceived them through the lens of her own deep spiritual inner life. As an unidentified empath, Cheri understood inherently from the time she arrived in Frankfurt, Germany, the deep wounds left behind by World War II. So she began to write prolifically to express her feelings and those emotions in a way that made sense to her. That Yellow Notebook was a compilation of her many creative works that was accidentally left with a specific rock band during one of her surreal adventures, where she found herself in a situation she could not have imagined possible. So, join me as we seek light and journey into the deep with Cheri DeLavie. Enjoy. Well, Cheri, thank you so much for joining me. I truly can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. So if you could share with our listeners and our viewers who you are and what it is you do.
Okay. Well, I, first and foremost, am a human being.
Love that.
That probably goes without saying, but what I do is I'm an author, and I also do body work, massage therapy, Reiki, spiritual coaching. And that pretty much sums it up. I've been doing that for about 20 years now. So I'd like to think I've learned a little bit of something in that time. And I specialize in modalities that are more deeply ingrained into getting into the level of the quantum level of the body, basically. So, yeah, myofascial release and craniosacral therapy are two of the modalities that I tend to utilize the most. So, and I'm also, as you know, an author, which is why I'm here. I wrote a book. It's a long time coming. So, yeah, and feel free to ask me questions and be specific, because otherwise I might just give you a really quick answer and stop talking. So you want me to talk. So
that's okay. No, this is a conversation, so it's great either way. That's awesome. Yeah, you definitely, you talk about, with your book, your authorship, talking about dancing with my soul, the journey of the Yellow Notebook.
Isn't that a long name?
No, I think it's a great name.
You like it?
I think it's fantastic. Yeah. and it conjures up, some visuals anyway. I picture a yellow notebook and where it's traveled to and fro. Um, so yeah, you now, is this a work of fiction or is this a nonfiction writing for those listening?
Well, that's an interesting question. It is actually the truth, but I had to write it from perspective where I protected everybody's identity.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right on.
Sometimes you have to change little places or names, places, sometimes every once in a while, maybe a date, but the narrative itself is just the truth. So,
right on.
This all actually happened.
Right on.
Yeah.
So what got you on this trajectory? I hear you were writing from a very young age, but just never had it in you to necessarily write right off the bat. It took you some time, huh?
Yeah. My mother had me doing flashcards from the time I was probably 3 to learn my letters because my grandmother was a first grade school teacher. So it just was drilled into me. I remember sitting there in the chair and they're doing the flashcards and I'm like, okay, we're done now. You're 3, you don't want to do that. But I actually, language just was a huge part of me. Even when I was an infant, my mom said that my auntie had sent me a box of toys and books, and I crawled over the toys to get to the books and started turning the pages. And she said she was just basically, choking up. She was really shocked. She didn't really understand how an infant could do that. So I think I was probably around 9 months or something. But anyway, so yeah, writing is in my soul, I would say. And for the longest time, it was sort of pushed on me, and I probably would have to say that one of the reasons I waited so long to write a book was because of that. And also because, and I do mention this in the book a lot, I really took it for granted. And it took me a long time to understand that it was, in fact, a skill and a gift, and that it is something that I needed to utilize. So that's what I'm doing.
I think that's great. You bring up a great point when you realize a skill and a gift at the same time, and sometimes it can be challenging to identify it first early on,
Yeah.
What was that precipice that really got you to realize that it was a gift?
Well, the fact that a lot of people used my notebook and made a lot of money, that was kind of a big aha moment. I'm really quite unassuming about my effect on others, and especially when I was younger. The book, goes into when I was 16, and it covers a great deal of territory, from basically 14 when I moved all the way up to just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Basically the present. There's still things that I'm in an edit to add something else, a little something else in there, little golden nugget in there. So anyway, could you just reframe that question for me? Because I want to.
Yeah, sure. What was that, for you? Like, what was that tipping point, that edifice that really got you to, I guess, or what got you on that trajectory? What inspired you to realize that it was a gift? And you brought up a point that, people using your words, and making money off of that. But for you to realize that it was a gift, I guess, in addition to some of those things.
To realize it was a gift and that it was valuable and that it meant something to others was really quite a long process, I have to say. I never dreamt in a million years that my notebook would have inspired these people that I, at the time, was inspired by. Mm. It just right over my head. I just wouldn't have dreamt it. So for me, it was quite a shock and surprise to uncover all of this that's explained in the book and the narrative. Uh, and and I really feel like it wasn't just one singular moment. It was quite a few moments because I'm a very deeply spiritual person, and I had been doing spiritual work for a very long time when all of this kind of crashed in. And I was like, universe, whatever. So people used my work, were inspired by me. And the universe was like, no, and it kept coming in at me saying, no, you have to look at this. There's no other option. I mean, if I had had another option, believe me, I would have taken it because I didn't want to look at it, didn't want to realize the extent of it, the depth of it, the breadth of it. And so the universe lovingly and firmly just kept bringing it around and bringing it around to the point where I had to recognize, and I say in one of the places in the book, I think is in the preface, I was really backed into a corner by the universe, by my team of wonderful beings that helped me. And and I just, it's like at some point you have to stop denying something and say, okay, this is a gift and a skill, and I'm going to go ahead and utilize it because I have no other options, because I'm not, I'm smart enough to know that if I kept resisting it, it was just going to get worse. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I did. And I remain extremely grateful to the universe and to everything that brought this together for me to be able to do this, to write the book and to tell the truth, because I felt that it was so important, and not just for me, but for others. So many people have experienced feeling marginalized, or, without getting into specifics, there's so much going on in the world. And what was contained in my yellow notebook was my 16-year-old heart, viewing the world from that standpoint, with bewilderment, and yet some very deep spiritual experiences that I had that are described in the book. And being an empath, growing up in post-World War II, West Germany was, it's like, hey, let's put an empath in the middle of World War II, West Germany, and see what happens, and this is what happened to me. And I'm sure, everyone has their own experience. This was mine. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. And, it's interesting when you talk about your journey and, your soul's journey, and depending on one's stance on things, if there are things, if you subscribe to soul contracts or things where you put yourself there and you wanted to learn something, or if it's just happenstance that you ended up in West Germany post World War II.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So in your book, you get into some really deep things with as far as what you are letting the reader know, what you're proposing about your words, and how somebody else essentially stole your words and took your words. When you first heard these lyrics through your speakers, what was your first reaction?
Well, I describe it in the book. I said, it hit there. First of all, there are many different artists that some shape or form of this notebook has come through. And I would like to make clear that I don't believe it was really malicious, although I do believe it was very selfish and self-serving for some people. in what their actions were. And I'm not judging. I'm just basically saying this is what my observation has been. I think that just people, so let me just answer your question. So this was going on for a long period of time, and it actually continues to this day, which just blows my mind. But anyway, so the first time that it really kind of like started to get in, but I didn't like follow up on it, was what I describe in the book, where I'm sitting there. I think I had just broken up with my fiance, and I was sitting there and I was going to listen to this album, and it was going to be, breakup album, to the whole thing. This is a long time ago. And I do say in the book, I must have slipped into a parallel dimension, because it was like so personal. It was not, and that's the thing. Everybody has their connection to music, and everybody feels like their connection to music is personal. But for me, this was like so personal, like so into my psyche. And I was like, what is going on? And that was the first kind of, because I have a very strong connection to source. And so I've been very protected throughout this process, because if I had learned of, like, really, if all of this had gotten through any sooner to where it was totally fully up in my face, like the consciously, like, oh my God, I can't deny this. If it happened any sooner than it did, it wouldn't have been serving my highest good. And so the person, its infinite compassion, made sure that it happened in a way that was going to be the gentlest on me. And sadly, even the gentlest way was not so pleasant. So that's, and I think that for me, part of it was just recognizing what I discuss in the book later, which is sort of the dark underbelly of the entertainment and the music industry. And these artists are like, I describe in the book this beautiful lotus they grow from the shite, and they bloom, but they're in this environment that's so blatantly toxic. And it's very difficult, everything is magnified by the energy of the music. And I was watching your interview with Ron, and he talks about Tesla and energy, vibration, frequency. And so you have these beautiful artistic souls that go into this, and they just want to express, many of them just, that's what they want to do. Some of them, there's a mix of human beings on this planet. I think we all know that. So, all different kinds of people that go into this, but there are true artists, and I do feel that some of these tragically have some, well, they met tragic ends, let's just put it that way, and questionable ends, not going too far into that. And I do feel like it's very important to not deify musical artists. And I know you yourself are a musical artist, so
yeah, I love music.
Yeah, and you play music, and I was told recently that somebody had gone to an Easter service and they incorporated the Beatles into the Easter service, and and I thought, well, I love the Beatles. I mean, I love the Beatles as much as anybody. I really do. They're one of my favorite all-time bands. Thank God, they were all doing their thing before my yellow notebook, because I don't have a problem with it. Yeah.
Right.
I keep looking over here because I have two monitors, and so I can see you better on this one, and I like to be able to see you. But and I can see you here too, but it's just behind the light. So anyway, and I thought, but it was sort of a really firm example for me of how musicians in popular culture and popular culture has been deified, and it's like, these are human beings. And I think I make that very clear in the book. These are human beings. We're all human beings having whatever, some people say having a spiritual experience, however you'd like to look at that. But we each have this innate, connection to our own source. And musicians are no different. And everybody that listens to music is no different. We all have that connection to source. And when we put people on pedestals and look up to them, they have nowhere to go but down, because they're human. They're here to have their experience, whatever that may be. And generally, not all the time, but generally, that includes making some mistakes. And then, when you put somebody on a pedestal and you have to keep them there, it's like, no, they can do no wrong. They can do no wrong. That stuff, we're not worthy and all that. And, yes, they can. They're human beings. Does that take away from their ability as an artist? No. Does it add to their ability as an artist to have these deep human experiences? Yes. But do we want to look across the table at each other on a level playing field and just have compassion for each other? Like namaste. We're both here. We're doing what we're doing in the world. We're experiencing what we're experiencing. And let's just honor each other and not place, and the other thing that happens to people that are on a pedestal is that they're either going to be exalted or deified, or then, they're going to shoot them down, metaphorically speaking. Going to try to bring them down because, they made a mistake. Well, that's it. They're this, they're that. Nobody can withstand that kind of pressure. Nobody, especially not people that are constantly in an industry that forces this lifestyle that has killed many musicians early because of it. I mean, the list goes on of all these incredible artists that did not last a long time. And that's because the system is flawed, in my humble opinion. So it's like, you just can't expect that. And they love it. They love it so much that they'll do anything. Anything. And for me, that's a choice in the book that I made not to go down that path, because I was offered a recording contract with a German music producer. Fell into my lap. And I thought long and hard. I contemplated, I was in my 20s and I'm like, oh God, what could possibly happen if I do this? And I'd seen it close up and personal. I had seen all the highs, all the lows, all the drama, all the beauty. It was all mixed up in this really fascinating package of this band touring. And that, I know I describe it in the book, but, my answer to myself at that point in time was, well, I could become famous. And that to me would be the worst. At that time, for me, I knew that was not the best outcome for me at the time. I knew that I wouldn't survive that. So I opted not to sign the contract. So there you go.
You bring up some great points about just in your words, how some observers of musicians, artists, and things, they tend to deify. I believe that was the word you had used. And you're right. In the way that people put individuals up on a pedestal, and the amount of pressure that puts on an individual, who most artists and most creatives are using creativity as an outlet anyway, as a point of catharsis, some as a form of therapy. So is it any wonder with the lifestyle that, you talk about, like touring, there's a lot of different temptations out there around musicians and artists. Is it any wonder that some sadly and tragically meet these, early departures, so to speak?
Yeah, it's no wonder to me.
Why do you think it's so challenging for us as a society to be able to look at artists and musicians objectively and look at them as human beings?
That's very complex and deep, and I'll see if I can explain my point of view. I'm not saying that I have the absolute right point of view, but my point of view is pretty complex. Um, and I'm better at writing sometimes than I
Sure, no problem.
verbalizing. But which is why I filled up all those so much. Anyway, I feel, if you look at like Jungian psychology, he went into the archetypes, and Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And every single human being on this planet, in my belief system, if you like to put it that way, has their own archetypal journey that they're on. And then what happens is these people that get placed in the spotlight, one begins to identify with them, to connect to the message. Music is a very powerful catalyst. It is a vibration and frequency depending on, there's a lot of different variables there. And then you have the words. This is very powerful. It is not something to be taken lightly, in my humble opinion. And what happens is that, if you even watch people's faces, if you've ever watched a YouTube video and people are looking up at the band, because first of all, usually they're higher on stage, which it just is what it is. But they have the courage to be up there in the first place, or the chutzpah, or, whatever you want to say. And so they're up there and they're putting themselves up there, and the people just have this look of awe, and part of it is because it's representing being able to stand basically in some sort of center in oneself to be able to do that. And so it becomes this sort of, from my perspective, an admiration, and then it builds up to this exaltedness. And the music that can be played over and over and over again becomes this sort of fabric interwoven into a person's life. And so then it takes on this personal meaning when it's attached to certain, events in a person's life. We all know about, that's my song, from 19 whatever or 20,000 whatever. That's my jam. So ultimately, I feel like it is the power that is carried through the music, because there's an inspiration stream that sort of flows for people that are really in the flow. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that all musical artists are, but the ones that are really in the flow, there is something that happens and it's transformative. But then, as you said before, all these things are being projected onto this person. So once they get into the public eye, suddenly everybody's projecting, you can call it shadow nature, unconscious nature, if you look at the collective consciousness and the collective unconscious. And everybody starts to project this onto the person, person X or whatever. And then suddenly all of their highest aspirations are projected onto this person, everything that they wish they could be, or that, stands for something that is important to them. And then all of the shadow aspects or the unconscious aspects are being projected onto these people. And so these people are being hit by a barrage of all this stuff all the time. And, some people, there are ways to cope with it. Part of it, I think, is having a grounded family around a person, but also you have to look at the development of the personality, the persona. Some people call it the ego. that is a protective mechanism. But then with all of this stuff being projected on the artist, what I feel happens to them is they're either going to sink or swim. And some of them swim long enough and get through it, because it's like a bell curve, I think, for the most part. It goes up and then there's a little, the tail end. Some people ride that top of that wave for a long time of the fame, and then eventually it goes down. The people that aren't able to navigate that kind of intensity, which is basically being exemplified by what we're seeing in the world, everything that's happening right now, it's the volume's way up. Of course, are the ones that end up in some really sad and questionable circumstances. Regardless of what look, there's Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, the list goes on and on and on. So there's plenty of modern examples of that as well. And I also feel that the people that need to be accountable, the ones that are the bean counters, counting the money, they're the ones that keep pushing the artists. And there's some of that in the book too as well. It's like push, and it's like they want money, they want more money, more money, more money, money. And it's like, really? Where does human value come into this? Where does compassion come into this? When do you recognize that this beautiful soul that has agreed at some level to be up there for all, basically the ones that are known around the world for a great number of people, at some point, they're losing their cash value, because then the record companies they can make just as much as with the artist dead.
Yep.
And that's where I feel that it's really disturbing. It's deeply disturbing. And I don't feel that it's taken seriously enough. And it's funny because, my work was used without my permission. And yet I feel very strongly about being an advocate for some of the people that I know used my work that are now no longer here. Because I have a view that encompasses everything that I know they were dealing with, including their own personas, wanting to make their mark in the world. For everyone, it's a different story. But from my perspective, no one deserves to be treated, like a thoroughbred racehorse and run until they're run into the ground, and then they're tired and they need to rest. And then suddenly, oh, well, really, what happens to these people? And who is responsible? It could be by the artist's own hand, and it could be by other means. But it's really, it's disturbing, and I feel like it needs to be taken seriously. I feel like it needs to be taken from underneath and pushed up into the light, because people need to realize that the people that they idolize are dealing with all of this all the time. And then, you shouldn't complain because, you're a millionaire, billionaire, whatever the case may be. That doesn't get rid of one's personal problems. It's got zero to do with the way that a person's interacting with their own psyche. It may do some persona things, but it doesn't get rid of personal problems or issues. In many cases, it probably will magnify them. So there you go.
No.
It's not, I wish that I could say something more lighthearted about it, but I really can't. I think it's important to acknowledge.
And I think you bring up a great point. If it's something that's serious, then it needs to be discussed openly. and for people to see that other perspective that I think they really see on a regular basis. You brought up a great point earlier about, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially when an artist has then departed and left and transitioned into the afterlife, seemingly their back catalog is now skyrocketed. People now or rediscover the band or musician, and now they're worth more to the industry, so to speak. And it, some people, I remember there was a conversation that had come up without sounding too controversial or even, I guess, even conspiratorial. But when it came up about, take an artist like Michael Jackson, who was on the precipice he was going to own all his music. He had one last album to finish, and mysteriously something goes wrong. And, is that the kind of stuff you're talking about?
I would say that would certainly be included. It's included in the kind of stuff that you're talking about.
Right. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, and obviously I only want you to share what you feel comfortable sharing, but you talk about, some other artists that how would you say you inspired, or would you feel blatantly stole your lyrics or stole words from you?
Well, that's a tough one. I am a person that really does look for the best in people. And it was very challenging for me to entertain the thought or the idea or the concept that some of this was, malicious. That I describe in the book. Once they figured out something's working and it's making money, they're just going to keep doing it. I mean, it's pretty simple. I was looking for all these complex reasons, but I think that was the bottom line. So you're asking me how I feel about them, or?
No, I guess, do you feel as though you inspired these lyrics, or do you feel as though these were blatantly plagiarized from you?
I definitely feel that there's quite a lot of inspiration going on from what I've discovered. I'm laughing just because to me, it's like, I would be it was like, somebody took me, it was like, boom, hey, look at that. It's like, really? No, universe, really? So anyway, that part, yes, definitely felt like there was much inspiration over a wide variety of artists. And then there was a category of people that used it for their own personal gain. And also, I think there was sort of this, definitely directly using my words, for sure, using my specific lyrics and describing a specific song that I put in the book. That was, and I honestly feel like in some cases, these people were trying to draw me out because I stopped. It's like after that band, I had so many opportunities to meet rock stars. You have no idea. The universe just kept putting them up there for me to meet. And I'm like, no thanks, universe. No, thank you. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Don't need to do that anymore. There's a wide variety of artists where I grew up, in Frankfurt, Germany. The community is small and tight. And so I knew people that were at concerts, and I could have gone backstage at a number of concerts, and I would describe some of it in the book, and I had, of course, change some of the names. But yes, I do feel like my words were used, and that's where I take some issue. I mean, we're talking a moral, ethical dilemma here. They used my notebook. They made lots of money from it. They read the whole thing, and for whatever reason, some sort of alchemy came together and produced what it did. And artists are just people. It's like, if you remember the first time you heard that album that just like blew your mind and you just became a fan of some band or an artist, and you just fall in love with the music and the tone and the feeling of it. Like in the book, I describe Lionheart, Kate Bush, that's just falling in love with that, that creation. And I never realized that my notebook was, basically the same thing for many of these artists, some of whom were isolated from the world by the time they became famous, and say this notebook is introduced to them through this. One person that I describe in the book was definitely a thread that ran through many, many artists. And he's a lovely human being. He was amazing. But, and I don't think that he maliciously did that. I think that he just thought so highly of me, which, again, at the time, I never would have entertained that thought. But I think that that's what happened. I was authentically being myself. And that, coupled with the notebook and the photo and the boots, created this sort of mysterious sort of person. And they connected with me in the same way that I would connect with, this artist when I was, whatever age or developmental stage of my life. And it took me a long time to realize that it works both ways, because artists are constantly looking for ways to be inspired. Mm-hmm. Constantly, and not just for their own creative benefits, but also because, once they become bigger artists, there's financial pressures. So there's a lot of different reasons, Your question?
And did you, I guess what's important to note for those listening and watching, it's important to note, did you know did you willingly give this notebook? Was it taken from you? Like, how would you describe that whole experience?
Well, I feel like I made it pretty clear in the book. It's reading, let me just say this first. I was joking with a friend. I was like, you know what, if I start to date again, I'm going to just make this a prerequisite that whoever has to read the book first. Because there's no way that I'm going to be able to explain all this over a candlelit dinner. It's just not possible. If you really want to understand it, mm-hmm. and how it happened and the person I was then and the congruence of this rock band and me at the time, you got to read the book, because there's no other way to explain it. But having said that, could you just reframe that last question for me?
Yeah, sure. Just for those that are watching and listening, just so that we can make a point, just for, do you feel as though you willingly gave this book away? Or do you feel as though, like, did you know how it was going to be used?
No. I did not know how it was going to be used. No. I would never have dreamt that. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting sort of set of circumstances as to how it happened, which I very specifically describe in the book, because I just happened to be at the hotel and I had come from school and I didn't know my locker combination or something. So I had my books and my notebooks with me, because they kept inviting me to come back, and I was like, okay, I'll be there. And here I am with my books. So anyway, one of them the guitarist kept complaining about how bored he was, all the time. I'm so bored. I'm like, dude, you're a rock star. Get over being bored. I'm sorry, I'm just joking. But anyway, it's like, come on, you're living the life that so many people dream of. Figure out a reason or way not to be bored, And I'm sure he had other things on his mind besides, reading a 16-year-old girl's notebook. But what happened was he was complaining so much, and I was standing there with my books, and I just basically just tossed it over to him and said, here, read this. And he just it was so funny. The look on his face was just like, he was baffled, basically. He's an amazing guitarist. But anyway, and so he opened it and he started reading it. And then I just saw him go. It was so clear to me. And I was like, well, at least he won't be bored, right? And so I left it with him. And my understanding was that the band was going to be returning in 2 weeks and that I was going to be invited to spend time with them. So in my heart and mind, I thought I would be getting my notebook back. That's the bottom line. And it was a series of really weird events that ended up with me not getting it back. You know, so, and I was 16 and had shared some things with my friends, you know, it's like, here, read this, give it back to me when you're done, you know, that kind of thing, you know, oh, you need more time to read it? Well, keep it for a while and then give it back. That basically was my attitude, you know, not keep it for all eternity and pass it around to every other artist on the planet. I mean, that was surprising to me. And I felt really a variety of feelings about it. Because to me, the bottom line is ethically and morally, when you care about somebody and you have a piece of them, right? It's not like I tried, you know, you call your friend up and say, hey, I really want to see my notebook. I just want to read through it, you know, and get back into that head space or that heart space that I was in at that time. And that's one of the things that really I found disturbing, was that I was being stonewalled, because there was a period of time that these people did not know how to find me because I didn't want to be found, you know? So there was sort of a period of time where they didn't, but once they did, it should have been done. In other words, somebody should have stepped forward and said, hey, you know, this is what happened, and la, 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 la. And, you know, just been upfront and a decent human being, you know? You don't even have to be a highly evolved spiritual being. Just be a decent human being, you know? If you profess to have cared about me in some way, shape, or form, then you would care about what has happened to the contents of this book that was really, truly innocently given by a 16-year-old girl to people that she thought were kind of the pinnacle at that point in time of, you know, they were my favorite band. And, you know, I really did feel that. So the idea of me inspiring them was like, how could that even be possible? The universe did show me how. So now my question's answered. Yeah, it was possible. So was that pretty clear?
Yeah. Did you initially feel betrayed, or did that betrayal feeling come over time? Was it first like a fantastic feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing thing, they're using my words, I've inspired them, and then transitioned into this feeling of betrayal?
Great question. I felt so many feelings. First of all, just adjustment position. Being an empath, it's much more challenging to be able to process. Because as an empath, I am directly connected to my notebook energetically. No matter how many years, no matter how long it's been, that energy that I put in there and me are one soul signature. And you can look at it metaphorically, spiritually, otherwise. So that was quite a challenge. Empathetically, to have all of that energy, because you remember, I had not put myself out there. I chose not to. But I was being put out there on a level that was not giving me conscious permission. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%.
So in being put out there, there was a violation. And I'm not saying, again, that it was all malicious. I think there was a whole host of different reasons why people did this that just blows my mind and gives me such compassion. And, deep connection to these artists that I already had a great love for. But there was, yes, many levels of violation, awe, bewilderment, gratitude, humility, feeling humbled, so many things I couldn't really verbalize. And and it's like, when people deal with grief, there's a little floating thing right there. So when people deal with grief, they go through a process. And I feel like for me, in many ways, this was almost like going through a grief process. And there were a host of feelings, and you cycle through, and because I had been doing really deeply spiritual work for many years, thank heaven, I was prepared, but nobody can be prepared to do that kind of work on a level that I had to do it. I mean, it's like you can prepare, but once you get, when that happened and it finally all crashed in, it was quite a lot. And it took quite a long time to work through. And yes, there was betrayal, and there was a lot of feeling very humbled. Because I can't take credit for anybody else's brilliance in terms of, the ones that were inspired. I take issue with the ones that used my words and were more, manipulative about it. A little tiny gnat, a little tiny flutter, and that's it. So I take issue with the ones that use my words and I make that point in the book. It's very clear, it's professional courtesy. If somebody has a co-writing credit, you give them co-writing credit. It's as simple as that. And that was denied to me. And it's not because I want some sort of acclaim. It's not about that for me. It's about the really basic bottom line, moral, ethical accountability. If you say you're being accountable and you put yourself out there as a persona that's supposed to be a humanitarian or accountable person, then you need to follow through and be accountable on every level. You cannot build this pyramid of, or pinnacle of whatever any artist may aspire to be, given the artist, based on lies or manipulation or truths that you have kept buried or hidden because you're afraid. I know that some of these artists are afraid for a multitude of reasons, but I am not going to stop asking them to be accountable. That is what I'm asking. It's like, you know what? You did this, and I'm going to ask you to be accountable. 100% for it. And just the truth. That's really all I ever wanted, was the truth. 100% the truth.
I love that. Do you feel the book is asking them, is this book putting a spotlight on those individuals?
Yes, but not in a way. I very consciously wrote this book in a way to make these people presented as human beings. That's how I encountered them, as people, as human beings, having their good days and their bad days, their freaky days, or whatever is going on at the time. So it was very deliberate on my part to not demonize anyone. Mm-hmm. That didn't serve the purpose. The purpose was to reclaim my life and to make the truth available in some form and to put it out there in a form where others could find it and read it and understand it and hopefully be inspired by the fact that instead of choosing I could have chosen many different roads here, to make a point but I chose the road that was in alignment with my spiritual truth, the spiritual truth that I am aligned with, with my core, with my heart, with my compassion, with all of the beautiful teachers that I've had in my life and the principles that I hold so dearly, which is just basically love and compassion for people. But that doesn't mean you have to be a doormat. You can still ask. You still ask for accountability. You can still ask for people to take responsibility for their actions. You can ask it from a place of kindness, love, compassion. And I'm not going to stop doing that. I'm going to continue to ask for accountability because I know who many of these people are. And I have seen some of them up close. And I've even had some encounters with people that I won't go into because it probably wouldn't be appropriate here. But there have been some really strange, when this kind of thing hits your life, there are some really weird things that start to come into your orbit, because when I had to finally deal with it, there were a lot of things and people that came into my orbit and events. And I'm grateful for everything because it's led me to the point where I am now. And I am so grateful for you as well.
Oh, likewise.
And George.
Props to George.
The fabulous George.
Love George.
George. I don't know you, George, but
he's wonderful. He's a wonderful human being.
Yes.
When you talk about, for our viewers and our listeners, when you're saying, forced to finally have to deal with it, that can seem cryptic to someone. And obviously, I know we're being cryptic about certain things. I only want, and I'm respecting that. I want you to only share what you feel comfortable sharing. And I want people to read the book. I implore people to read the book. But when you say you were forced to finally have to deal with it, is there something in particular you mean by that?
That's a really challenging thing to try to answer. I think the best way to explain it is, some people are spiritual people and some people just take it to the possible level. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was at in my life when this, and it was like, I was very centered in my heart space. I was living basically a heart-centered, compassionate existence. And the universe, when, call it God, source, angels, universe, when you get to that space in your life, there comes a point where if you're truly on the path that you have chosen to go as deep as you possibly can on a spiritual level, that everything comes back around to you. Mm. So there was no possible way for me to finish this life without really having processed through this entire situation. In other words, it would have stunted my spiritual growth. And in stunting my spiritual growth, it would have facilitated an untruth that was going on in the world. And as I said before, as I started with, music is very powerful. And that's why I feel that it's important. I'm not trying to shame these people. It's not about that. It's about bringing it into the light and letting it be what it is. Once you bring something into the light, then it just dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the most important thing. So for me, as a person that was on a very specific, deeply spiritual path, I could not escape having to deal with this. I couldn't say, oh, I've had Buddhist teachings, and so I do believe in other lifetimes. It's just something that makes complete sense to me.
Mm.
And there's no way I could wait around to another life, to deal with this,
Sure.
because that would have been way too complex. I had to deal with it here and now, and that's what I did. And again, I really didn't want to write the book, but because of the stonewalling, the universe, the way that it all developed, it was just like into my face. This is the choice. And for me, I had always known that I was going to write a book about my life. I didn't know when, because people get, you should write a book. You should write a book. And then, and then I realized it's like, what do I do? How can I be my authentic self with people with this thing, that has really, it completely affected my life on many different levels. And there was no way that I could not write the book. I had to.
Yeah.
I had to reclaim my life, and in so doing, ask for accountability from the people involved and let them know that, again, I'm asking for accountability. So there was, honestly, I would have avoided it if I could have.
Mm.
Not like I wanted to be out here talking about this.
Right.
But in order to reclaim my own life and also present the truth, and, because what they did is they inverted this energy. So the energy that was inverted had to come back out. It had to come back up in a new form. So basically, that's what I'm participating in now consciously, is clearing, healing this thing, this situation that included me, because it was my notebook, but also included a number of many different people whose lives were deeply affected.
Mm.
And so to heal everyone, basically, and I'm not taking responsibility for the healing of all these other people. I'm taking responsibility for the healing of myself and making the healing available. Do you see the difference, what I'm trying to say?
I do.
It's like, we can do this, we can heal this. Let's, this is my sole intention is that. And I have forgiven everyone involved, regardless of if it was, used maliciously or not. Which took a lot of doing.
I bet.
It did.
I bet.
I tell you, you walk your talk when you deal with something like this, and you're a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the one that holds me accountable.
Right.
I can't hide from myself. I have to be accountable to me. And for me, it has to be love, compassion, bringing it into the light and heal it.
I can align with that. You brought up, absolutely. And you brought up something, again, when you talk about asking for accountability, we're talking about, bringing it into the light. Do you feel in the book you articulated enough on who you're talking about specifically, or you said, just for people, I want people to go and check out the book. So do you feel like you're saying this is it? And how many artists would you say? I mean, gosh, for those listening, off the top of your head, how many different artists are we talking about here that people would probably know?
More than 20.
Mm-hmm.
More than 20 artist bands that were somehow related to the Yellow Notebook.
Yeah.
I mean, but it is what it is. I had to accept it. I had to just come to terms with it, accept it, and have compassion for the people, for example, that are no longer here.
Right.
Truly. So much compassion. I mean, these people gave their lives, in essence, to being public figures, to uplift in some way, shape, or form, to help heal humanity and those broken, quote unquote, broken souls out there that needed inspiration. So how can I can't not understand that. And I don't take issue with them using what I did for inspiration. I still would have liked to have been told and asked and acknowledged, not necessarily publicly, just private, person to person, because that's just the way that things, from my perspective, should be done, need to be done. But there's a lot of people. And some of them I've actually met the family members totally in a very strange series of things. I met family members of some people, very huge artists that are no longer with us. So like I said, I've had just this really interesting string of very strange events they seem like happenstance, but really they were directed by something.
Right.
You just don't run into these people randomly.
Right.
For no reason. It just doesn't happen, especially where I was and what I was doing and what I'm trying to talk about cryptically. But it was a deeply healing experience to meet the family members of this particular artist that I'm thinking of. And also their responses to me were very different. Like I describe in the book, the last artist that I describe, if you may or may not remember, I'm not sure. I don't know if you did the Cliff Notes version of the book or if you actually got to read the whole thing through, because I know you're very busy. But the last artist, they all have a very unique way of relating to me. The ones that know me, I mean, it was so crystal clear to me. There was just it was at the time sort of mind-blowing. Even though I knew it, when you see somebody that's that terrified because you're in their presence, regardless of what their reasons are, maybe they signed a non-disclosure agreement and they're terrified of the consequences of they're not supposed to talk to me or interact with me. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's the truth. I don't know for certain. I do know that their reactions to me were off the charts in terms of alarm and fear. And then this really kind of a fascination too, which, and they're fighting their fear and they're fascinated because, it was obvious to me. Thank goodness I took a lot of training in the human sciences. I'm able to really pick up on these things now that when I was 16, I was good at, but I didn't have a language for, and now I do. So body language speaks volumes, and when somebody jumps in the air and flails their arms and their eyes go like this because they just figured out who you are, right, you can pretty much be certain that they're having a moment. Yeah. So, and again, I don't want to shame these people. I'm not trying to shame these people. I feel that many of these people are caught up in the construct of an industry. And the way things are done are so disturbing in this industry with these non-disclosure agreements. It's let's just tell the truth about things and let the truth be out there. The world is filled with so much right now. And I feel personally what we need is a big dose of truth. just let it come up, let it rise up, let the truth be known, and let's all just get on with our lives and be the best human beings we can be, whatever that is for each one of us. I don't decide that for anyone else. I don't do my best to decide it for me,
I love that. It's so true. So if folks are wanting to look for this book, and the book we're talking about is Dancing with My Soul, The Journey of the Yellow Notebook, where can folks find it?
It's on Amazon. I put it out on Amazon. I sort of slipped it over there during the deep quarantine part of the pandemic. And I didn't feel comfortable trying to do any kind of marketing or anything at that point. It's just I just need to just put this over there and let people who find it read it, or people that know me that want to read it, and just get some feedback. And that's happened. And so now it's actually in an edit for a second edition where I'm going to add a few little tidbits there, and so a copy edit too. And so it's on Amazon now. And then I have a Facebook page that's basically devoted to the book, and an Instagram account. And I have to say, I'm really not all over social media lots. I don't do a lot of posting. I'm trying to do more of that. I'm going to be trying to make myself more available to people who would like to reach out to me for the spiritual coaching aspect of what I do. But as for the book, yes, it's on Amazon, and I can give you a link to that you can put in the description box below.
Awesome. In closing, is there any last things you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers?
Be true to yourself. Authentically true to yourself. Love yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. From my personal experience, that's the only way to grow as a human being. Kindness, love, compassion. And as you do those things with yourself, it just organically grows and spreads out to all areas of your life. And let me just take this opportunity again to say thank you to you and George.
Absolutely.
Really do appreciate you having me on the show. I appreciate so much basically this entire experience today. I really do. And I love watching your show because I've watched a few now. And
thank you.
Yeah. And I really love the way that you're able to connect with people and stay in a very sort of centered space about everything, and then also being able to sort of flow with it. I've observed that and felt that connection. And I think we need more voices like yours out there.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And so having your voice out there also is a wonderful thing. So I appreciate you putting your voice out there for people and for me.
And there you have it. I can't thank Cheri enough for sharing so many personal stories and personal moments with us today. We talked about so many different things in that episode. We talked about that yellow notebook that she accidentally left behind with an unmentioned band. But for those who read the book would 100% surely know if you know your music history. We talked about how that book is the story that describes her, that 16-year-old girl that carried that message of hope and faith in her heart. And we got to discover that person that she was and still is. Be sure to check out the links in the description below and find her book, Oh Cheri, Dancing with My Soul, The Journey of the Yellow Notebook. You can also find Cheri on Facebook as well as on Instagram at CA DeLavie, and that's CADELAVIE. Thank you all so much for listening. George and I can't thank you all enough for the love and support you've shown us since the inception of this podcast. We have our Patreon channel where we have more content, exclusive offerings, and even more to check out. So be sure to check out our Patreon page. And If you're watching this podcast, please hit that like button. We hope you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell so you can find out about new episodes. You can find us on Instagram at itd.jcosta, as well as on Twitter at itd_jcosta. Thank you all so much. Until next time, take care of one another and keep thinking for yourself.